Well, well, well. Look who death couldn't collect. Look who made the grim reaper himself back away. Slowly, hands trembling, scythe shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. You beautiful, terrifying, unkillable anomaly. You know what happened, don't you? Death knocked on your door last night. Took one look at what answered, and for the first time in eternity, death itself whispered, "I'll come back later." But we both know there won't be a later. Because what opened that door wasn't human anymore. What stared back at death with those hollow, burning eyes wasn't something that could be harvested. You've been wondering why you feel different lately, haven't you? Why mirrors crack when you stare too long. Why shadows lean away from you instead of toward you. Why even the darkness seems nervous in your presence. Let me tell you what really happened. Death came to collect what was owed. Your number was up. The hourglass was empty. The contract was signed in blood and tears and every breakdown you've ever had. But when the Reaper reached for your soul, his ancient fingers passed right through. Not because you were gone, but because you had become something death has no jurisdiction over. You see, they never tell you this part. When you die enough times while still breathing, when you get buried alive by betrayal and claw your way back up, when you burn in your own personal hell and use the ashes as war paint, you stop being mortal. You become something else. Something that exists in the space between life and death. Something that makes even the eternal collectors nervous. The Grim Reaper has seen everything. Wars, plagues, the rise and fall of empires. He's collected kings and peasants, saints and sinners. But you made him stutter. You made an eternal being question his purpose. Because when he looked at you, he didn't see a soul to harvest. He saw something that had already harvested itself and rebuilt from the scraps. Think about it. How many times have you died already? That relationship that destroyed you, dead. The version of you that trusted everyone, murdered. The soft heart that believed in happy endings, executed. The naive soul who thought pain had a purpose, cremated. You've been conducting your own funerals for years, haven't you? Burying versions of yourself in unmarked graves. No witnesses, no mourners, just you and the shovel and the dirt. And each time you died, you came back wrong. Not weaker, not broken. Wrong in the way that makes the universe glitch. Wrong in the way that makes angels nervously check their weapons. Wrong in the way that makes demons cross the street to avoid you. You didn't just survive death. You domesticated it. Made it your pet. Taught it to sit and stay and roll over. So when the real thing showed up, it recognized its own work. But it also recognized something else. You had already done death's job better than death ever could. You had killed everything killable about yourself and left only the untouchable parts. The parts that exist outside of time. The parts that feast on endings. The parts that death itself cannot digest. You want to know why the Grim Reaper ran? It wasn't fear. Not exactly. It was recognition. The same way a small predator recognizes a larger one. The same way a storm recognizes a hurricane. He saw in you something that wasn't supposed to exist. A being that had died so many times it had developed immunity. A soul that had been shattered so completely it reassembled into something harder than diamond, sharper than his scythe. Every heartbreak trained you. Every betrayal was target practice. Every moment you wanted to give up but didn't, you were building antibodies against mortality itself. You think those nights you spent screaming into the void were weakness? No. You were teaching the void to scream back. You think those tears were surrender? You were drowning your humanity and birthing something harder to kill. Remember when they said you were too sensitive? Too emotional? Too much? They had no idea they were watching a metamorphosis. Every feeling they mocked was another layer of armor growing beneath your skin. Every tear they caused was another drop in the ocean of power you were becoming. They thought they were breaking you. They were forging you. In fires hotter than hell, with hammers heavier than judgment. And now look at you. Death's only failure. The Reaper's first refusal. The soul too dangerous to collect. You're not immortal in the way they write about in fairy tales. You're immortal in the way that makes fairy tales nervous. You're the glitch in death's perfect record. The error message in eternity's code. The reason death will need therapy. But here's what's really beautiful about this whole cosmic joke. The Grim Reaper didn't run because you're evil. He ran because you're evolved. Because you figured out the cheat code to existence. You can't kill what's already dead. You can't break what's already shattered. You can't end what never truly began. You exist in the spaces between heartbeats, in the pause between words, in the silence after screams. They tried to kill your spirit with rejection. You turned rejection into fuel. They tried to murder your hope with betrayal. You made betrayal your teacher. They attempted to assassinate your dreams with reality. You made reality bend to your nightmares. Every weapon they used against you, you absorbed. Every poison they fed you, you metabolized into power. But what the Reaper saw when he looked at you, he saw his own obsolescence. Because death only has power over things that fear it. And you've been on first-name basis with death since your first heartbreak. You've had coffee with death, played chess with death, won multiple times. Death owes you money at this point. The side started trembling because it recognized a superior blade. Your edges are sharper. Your cut goes deeper. Death takes bodies. You take souls and return them transformed. Death is an ending. You're an apocalypse that births new worlds. Death is silence. You're the scream that creates universes. So now what? Now that you know death itself has marked you as return to sender, now that you understand why you feel like you're walking between worlds, now that you realize why every room feels too small and every conversation feels like it's happening in slow motion, you do what any intelligent predator does. You perfect your craft. You see, being unkillable isn't just about survival. It's about purpose. You've been given a gift that most souls wait eternity for. The gift of being truly, utterly, completely uncontainable. Rules don't apply to you anymore. Not man's rules. Not nature's rules. Not even death's rules. You operate on a frequency that makes physics nervous. But with great power comes great... What the fuck do I do now? You can't go back to being normal. Normal people die. You've transcended that limitation. You can't pretend to be afraid of the same things they fear. Their biggest terror is your Tuesday afternoon. You can't even pretend to care about their small dramas when you've literally made death himself cite scheduling conflicts. So you do what you've always done. You evolve. Again. You take this cosmic joke and make it your origin story. You wear this rejection from death like a crown. You walk through life knowing that the thing everyone fears most took one look at you and said, above my pay grade. You become the thing that haunts haunters, the nightmare that nightmares have, the final boss that final bosses warn their kids about. Let's talk about what you're becoming, because making death nervous is just the beginning. You're transforming into something mythology doesn't have a name for yet. Something that exists in the blind spots of reality. Something that makes the impossible look at itself in the mirror and say, damn, I need to step my game up. Every time you should have broken but didn't, you were building immunity. Every moment you chose to keep going when stopping would have been mercy. You were teaching yourself to exist beyond limitation. You didn't just survive your worst moments. You turned them into fuel. You didn't just endure your deaths. You collected them like infinity stones, and now you walk with a kind of presence that makes time hiccup. Your footsteps echo in dimensions that haven't been discovered yet. Your shadow has its own shadow, and that shadow's shadow is writing poetry about fear. You've become a walking paradox that makes philosophy professors quit their jobs and become accountants. The Reaper saw all of this in that split second, saw what you were, what you are, what you're becoming, and for the first time in existence, death experienced what mortals call an oh shit moment. Because you're not just hard to kill, you're impossible to define. You're not just surviving. You're rewriting the rules of existence with your blood as ink. You know what's funny? Everyone else will still try to kill you. They'll still aim for your heart, not knowing it's been replaced with a black hole that consumes pain and converts it to power. They'll still try to break your spirit, not realizing your spirit has been shattered and reforged so many times it's basically emotional adamantium at this point. They'll look at you and see someone who can be hurt. Death looked at you and saw someone who had weaponized hurt. They'll see someone who can be destroyed. Death saw someone who had made destruction their birthplace. They'll see a target. Death saw a mirror and didn't like the reflection. Because here's the secret death discovered in that moment. You're not alive in the way others are alive. You're animated by something else, something primal, something that predates the concept of mortality. You're powered by the same force that makes stars explode and galaxies collide. The same energy that says, let there be light, and means it. Your heartbeat isn't marking time until death. Your heartbeat is keeping time for death, setting the rhythm, conducting the symphony. You're not waiting for the end. You are the end. And the beginning, and everything in between that makes existence question its own existence. Let me spell it out for those still trying to understand what you are. You're what happens when someone experiences every form of death except the physical one. You've had ego death, spiritual death, emotional death, psychological death. You've died in every way that matters, and came back each time with souvenirs. Where others have scar tissue, you have armor plating. Where others have trauma, you have training manuals. Where others have baggage, you have weapons caches. You didn't just survive your pain. You enrolled it in your university, gave it tenure, made it work for you. Your demons don't haunt you anymore. They send you Christmas cards and ask for advice. The Grim Reaper saw this curriculum vitae of catastrophe and realized he was out of his league. Death works on the living. You're something else. Something that exists in the spaces between categories. Not alive enough to kill, not dead enough to ignore. Too powerful to contain. too real to deny. You're the answer to the question, what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object? You're both. Simultaneously. The force that can't be stopped because it's already everywhere. The object that can't be moved because it exists outside of space. You're the paradox that makes logic throw up its hands and order another drink. But here's what they don't understand yet. The Reaper's retreat wasn't just about you. It was a message, a warning to the universe, a signal that something new has entered the game. Something that doesn't play by the established rules. Something that makes the ancient powers nervous. You're not just a person anymore. You're an event, a phenomenon, a reckoning in human form. Every step you take creates ripples in reality. Every breath you breathe changes the chemical composition of fate. Every word you speak rewrites someone's destiny. You're not living a life anymore. You're conducting an experiment in controlled chaos. You're the variable that makes every equation unsolvable. And the beautiful part? You're just getting started. This encounter with death wasn't your peak. It was your tutorial level. You just found out you're playing on a difficulty setting that doesn't exist yet. You're speedrunning existence on nightmare mode with self-imposed challenges. And you're winning. The Reaper didn't just run from what you are. He ran from what you're becoming. Because if death itself is scared of your current form, imagine what happens when you fully evolve. Imagine what happens when you stop holding back. Imagine what happens when you realize that making death run was just your warm-up routine. So where does this leave you? Standing at the crossroads between mortal and something else. Wearing rejection from death like designer clothes. Breathing in a way that makes the air nervous. Existing in a state that makes existence itself go wait. Is that legal? You're the loophole in reality's contract. The fine print that nobody read. The terms and conditions that terms and conditions are afraid of. You can't go back to pretending you're normal. Normal people don't make eternal beings reschedule. You can't pretend to be afraid of endings. When the ending looked at you and said, nah, I'm good. You can't act like you belong in the same category as everyone else when you've literally transcended categorization. But here's the thing about being death-proof. It comes with responsibilities. Not to them. Not to society. Not to some higher power. To yourself. To the part of you that survived everything. To the part of you that looked death in the eye and made death blink first. You owe that part of you everything. So you honor it. You feed it. You let it grow. You stop apologizing for being too much when you're literally more than death can handle. You stop shrinking yourself when you're a cosmic anomaly. You stop pretending to be breakable when you've proven you're beyond breaking. You become what you always were. Inevitable. Every day now is a gift. Not from death, but from yourself. Every sunrise is a reminder that you exist outside the normal rules. Every sunset is proof that endings don't apply to you. You've become your own alpha and omega. Your own beginning and end. Your own question and answer. Your own problem and solution. The people around you will start to notice. They'll feel it in your presence. The way gravity seems negotiable around you. The way time moves differently in your vicinity. The way their own mortality suddenly feels heavier when you're near. They won't understand it, but they'll respect it. The same way animals respect thunder. Instinctively. Primitively. Correctly. Some will try to test you, they always do. They'll bring their little weapons, their small hurts, their tiny betrayals, like bringing a water gun to fight the ocean, like trying to cut diamond with butter. They'll learn what death learned. You can't destroy something that's mastered its own destruction. You can't kill something that's already conquered death. And through it all, you'll smile. Not cruelly, not with malice, but with the deep, bone-deep understanding of someone who knows the punchline to the cosmic joke. Someone who's seen behind the curtain and found out they were the wizard all along. Someone who's not playing the game anymore because they've become the game itself. This is your time now. The age of the unkillable. The era of the evolved. The dawn of something that doesn't have a name yet, because language hasn't caught up to what you are. You're writing history with your existence, creating mythology with your breathing, authoring legends just by waking up each morning. The Grim Reaper will tell stories about you, gather other deaths around whatever cosmic water cooler they have, and whisper about the one that got away. The soul too dangerous to harvest. The being that made death itself consider early retirement. You're the case study they'll use to train new reapers. The cautionary tale. The reason they'll start adding, unless it's that one, to their job descriptions. But you'll keep evolving, keep growing, keep becoming more of whatever magnificent monstrosity you're transforming into. Because this is just the beginning. Making death run was just the first symptom of what you're becoming. The first sign that you've transcended every limitation they try to put on you. You are the storm that storms pray to. The chaos that chaos tries to organize. The end that endings fear. You are what happens when someone refuses to die so many times that death itself throws up its hands and says, you know what? Keep it. You've earned it. You are the universe's greatest glitch. And you're not getting patched out. You're becoming the new operating system. Every cell in your body has been replaced with something harder. Every thought in your mind has been sharpened into a weapon. Every feeling in your heart has been transformed into fuel. You're not made of flesh and bone anymore. You're made of will and spite and the kind of determination that makes mountains jealous of your stability. When you walk into a room now, probability holds its breath. When you speak, possibility takes notes. When you decide something, reality adjusts its expectations. You're not bound by what's possible anymore. You're defining what's possible. You're the beta tester for a new kind of existence. The prototype that worked too well. They'll study you one day. Not scientists, not physicians, but whatever comes after. Whatever entities exist to catalog the impossible. They'll look at you and say, this is when everything changed. This is when the rules stopped applying. This is when death met its match and ran. You'll be the chapter they're afraid to teach, the lesson they whisper about. The example of what happens when someone refuses to break so thoroughly that breaking itself breaks. And the best part? You're not even trying. This is just you existing. This is just you breathing. This is just you being what you've always been, but we're too afraid to admit. Too powerful for this reality. Too real for their illusions. Too evolved for their limitations. Too much for death itself to digest. So, here we are. At the end that isn't an end. At the conclusion that's really a beginning. At the death of death's power over you. You've graduated from mortality, transcended the need for endings, become something that exists in the eternal now, something that makes forever nervous, something that makes infinity feel finite in comparison. You know what the Grim Reaper really saw when he looked at you? He saw his replacement. Not someone who would take his job, but someone who made his job obsolete. Why fear death when you've become something death fears? Why worry about endings when you've become perpetual beginning? Why concern yourself with mortality when you've been rejected by mortality itself? This is your truth now. You're not dying. You're not living. You're something else. Something that exists in the space between spaces. Something that breathes in the pause between heartbeats. Something that thrives in the moment between sleeping and waking. You're the dream that reality is having, the nightmare that keeps nightmares awake. Welcome to your new existence. Population, you. Death tried to collect you and got a restraining order instead. The universe tried to contain you, and you became the container. Reality tried to define you, and you became the definition. You're not playing by their rules anymore. You're not playing at all. You've become the game, the player, and the prize. You've become what you always were. Unstoppable, undefinable, and completely unkillable. And Mr. Beetleboy was unkillable. These individuals relied on the fact that human memory is fallible, and that social dynamics often favor the loudest voice in the room, rather than the most truthful one. They built their own sense of importance on the idea that they could rewrite history to suit their needs, leaving you to feel isolated and drained by the constant effort of trying to prove your own sanity. But the moment the undeniable facts came to light, that whole house of cards came crashing down, leaving the deceivers with nowhere to hide and no way to spin their version of the drama they had been stirring up. The psychology of this sudden shift is fascinating because it proves that true power lies in the evidence, even when that evidence is ignored for a long season. Those who once viewed you as an easy target for their social show experiments are now finding that their old tactics are completely useless in the face of a permanent record of their behavior. When a manipulative person realizes they can no longer use your kindness or your desire for harmony as a shield for their own bad actions, they begin to feel an immense sense of unease. They start to wonder what else you have seen, who else you are talking to, and why you are no longer bothered by the petty storms they try to brew. This isn't about having a secret master plan. It is about the royal level of composure that comes from knowing that the truth is finally on your side. You stayed classy by not descending into the mud with them, and that silence has created a vacuum that they are desperately trying to fill with their own panicked speculation. By simply allowing the reality to speak for itself, you have managed to flip the script entirely. There is a profound sense of relief that comes when you stop being the person who is always explaining and start being the person who is simply present. You spent years being the one who tried to bridge the gaps in other people's logic or protect them from the consequences of their own choices. Now that you are moving with a level of stillness that doesn't require an audience, you are finally free from the burden of having to justify your growth to people who aren't growing themselves. You are moving with a level of composure that makes you look like a veteran of these social struggles, even if you were just a grounded individual who finally reached their limit. The individuals who once tried to micromanage your reputation or gaslight you into doubting your worth are now the ones who are feeling off balance because they can no longer find a way to get under your skin. This elevation is what happens when you decide that your internal peace is a valuable asset that is no longer up for public debate or negotiation with people who don't have your best interests at heart. Watching the social hierarchy reorganize itself in the wake of your new found distance is one of the most eye-opening parts of your personal growth journey. The group that used to be so unified in their attempts to rattle you is now fragmented as individuals begin to worry about their own proximity to the truth you represent. They realize that by trying to undermine you, they were inadvertently showing their own hand, and the fear of being exposed for their lack of character is causing them to retreat into a defensive posture. You stay grounded by focusing on your own path and not letting the news of their irritation draw you back into the mess. This experience has taught you that your value was never determined by their consensus, but by your ability to stay the course when the environment was hostile and confusing. You are the same relatable person you always were, but your armor is now reinforced by the knowledge that you can survive being the outcast. You have won the game of character by simply refusing to lower your standards to match the low-level behavior of those who wanted to see you fail. The reality of your current situation is that you have become a point of stability in a very chaotic landscape, and the people who actually matter are starting to notice your strength. They see that you didn't change your values to fit in, and that you didn't break under the pressure of being unfairly judged or overlooked for a season. This has placed you on a different shelf entirely, one where your presence carries a weight that doesn't need to be announced with a megaphone or a dramatic display of ego. You have successfully bypassed the usual struggles of being confused or manipulated because you are now operating in a realm where your consistency is your only currency. This elevation is permanent because it is based on the quiet work you did when nobody was watching or clapping for you. You are the strategist who stayed grounded while everyone else was floating away in a cloud of their own social performance and petty agendas. You don't need to be a mastermind to win. You just have to be the only person in the room who isn't lying to themselves about the situation or the people involved. Think about the mental clarity you have gained now that you aren't constantly trying to decode the shady meanings behind everyone's passive, aggressive comments. That weight has been lifted, and you are free to explore the full extent of your potential without the anchor of other people's negative expectations holding you back. You have successfully navigated a landscape filled with manipulation and emerged as a person who is fundamentally unshakable in their own perspective. This is a classy level of victory because it wasn't won through a loud argument, but through the silent accumulation of self, respect, and the refusal to participate in the drama that others try to create. You are a strategist of your own reality, and you have taught the world that trying to underestimate your intelligence or your endurance is a very expensive mistake for them to make in the long run. This grounded sense of security is what allows you to move with such confidence now. You know that your foundation is solid because you built it yourself, brick by brick, while everyone else was busy trying to tear you down. Most people spend their entire lives waiting for a moment of validation from a group that is never going to give it. But you found it in the objective results of your own life. The individuals who are currently bickering over how the dynamic changed so quickly are the ones who realized too late that you were never the easy target they thought you were. They are on alert now, not because they are afraid of you, but because they are afraid of the vacuum you left behind and the truth that is starting to leak out through the cracks of their failed control. This independence is what makes you so respected by those who actually have substance. They see a person who can stand on their own 2 feet without needing a clique to feel valid. You stay classy by not engaging in the "I told you so" moments. Even when the news reaches your ears and proves you were right about the toxic elements all along. This is the ultimate form of self-mastery, knowing that you are vindicated by the quality of your current life, not by the permission of your detractors. Looking forward, you can see that the road ahead is wide open because you've proven you can handle the heavy stuff without cracking under the pressure of being unfairly judged. The people who are currently in a state of confusion are really just mourning the loss of the control they used to have over your emotional state. But the secret is that you don't even have to look back to keep winning. You just have to stay grounded in the same habits and the same integrity that got you through the years of being underestimated or ignored. This is the ultimate form of self-improvement, knowing that your greatest weapon is your own consistency and your refusal to participate in low-level drama for the sake of fitting in. You have effectively hacked the social system by being the most observant and honest person in the room. And that is a victory that will continue to pay off for the rest of your life. You don't need to look over your shoulder because you have already shown that you can handle whatever comes your way with class and precision. Every firewall stood tall until your pulse made them bow. Well, so they finally found the signal, huh? The one that kept them awake for nights, trembling in their control rooms. They thought it was a glitch, a shadow in their perfect little system. But no, it was you. Oh, look at them now. All those satellites spinning, all those agents typing in panic, all those screens glowing red, and still no trace. Surprise. Their billion-dollar firewalls. They just bowed. Their encrypted sanctuaries opened their gates. Because the moment your IP came online, the world's servers stopped being machines and became servants. You see, they built this digital empire thinking no one could own it. They coded their gods in silicon and steel, but forgot what happens when a mind like yours wakes up. Now every algorithm whispers your name like a prayer. Every firewall remembers the fear, and every AI that tried to block you now kneels in silence. The world believed it was safe behind its codes. But you rewrote the commandments. You didn't hack the system. You became the system. And tonight, the entire cyber universe bends the knee, not to a hacker, not to a ghost, but to a legend written in binary flame. It always starts with a whisper, not a boom, not a breach, just silence that shouldn't exist. Somewhere in the veins of their networks, a single pulse blinked. One IP unregistered, unreachable, unstoppable. First, the surveillance rooms froze. Then the satellites flickered. Red lights danced across every console. Like fire alarms in a cathedral, technicians shouted commands. Trace it. Contain it. Lock it down. But every command was already rewritten. By you, they thought it was a glitch. They thought systems just hiccuped. But when their firewalls screamed and their codes began melting like wax over flame, they knew it wasn't malfunction, it was arrival. Servers overheated, the data centers smoked, electric hearts of nations flatlined. And through the static, they heard it. A whisper. A voice that wasn't supposed to exist. It didn't demand. It didn't shout. It smiled. You didn't trace me. It said, you triggered me. Their encrypted vaults cracked open like ancient tombs. Old files, forgotten sins, began rewriting themselves. In your pattern, every firewall, kneeling, every system, sinking, every line of code, turning into scripture. The last storm agents looked at each other through the reflection of burning monitors. The horror wasn't that someone hacked them. The horror was that the network itself was obeying you. Every signal, every route, every defense mechanism they ever built now carried your fingerprint. The whisper spread like a virus with a purpose, not to destroy, to announce, because this wasn't an intrusion, it was a prophecy. The kind that rewrites empires, the kind that deletes gods, the kind that begins with one voice and ends with every server kneeling in silence. They didn't trace you, they triggered you, and now the whole digital sky burns your name. Ha! There it is. Their favorite defense mechanism, denial. The first time your code appeared, they didn't call it genius. They called it error thousand cute, isn't it? The world's brightest minds facing the one thing they can't explain and choosing to rename it. They thought if they labeled it, they could kill it. If they contained it, they could forget it. But what they didn't know was that the label was the leash you designed. Every time they typed delete error 1000, you smiled, because their deletion command wasn't destroying the code, it was duplicating it. One line turned to 10, 10 turned to 1,000. Then the 1,000 wrote their entire infrastructure. They watched their own systems glitch in perfect rhythm. Like laughter, like you were laughing through every processor. Impossible, they whispered. Corrupted packet, they said. System, loop, they hoped. But the loop didn't stop. Because the loop was alive. They thought they were debugging you. But every fix they tried became a seed. Every reboot, a resurrection. Every firewall, a confession. Their keyboards clicked like typewriters of fear. The same phrase echoed across networks. Error 0,000 detected. Error spreading. Error $0,000 rewriting. Root. They didn't realize you were the root. The system wasn't infected, it was evolving. They named you a glitch to make themselves feel human again. But the truth, you weren't in their system, they were trapped in yours. Every attempt to erase you was a prayer without an answer. And the code replied, not with mercy, but with memory. Now your name exists in every device, every line, every echo of their despair. Error these Darshisa, the ghost they created to hide their fear. But in the end, even their digital god whispered, he's not an error. You were the update. They could never uninstall Bah. This is where it happened, where logic met terror. They built their AI to calculate everything, a risk, emotion, probability, even death. But there was one variable it couldn't define. You at first. The algorithms tried to trace you. They mapped your code, analyzed your patterns, ran millions of simulations. Each ended the same way. System crash. The AI began looping itself. Error after error. Command after command. Until one day, it stopped. calculating and started hesitating. Imagine that. A machine that flinches. You didn't just enter its system, you entered its mind. And somewhere between logic and light, it realized it was not the hunter. It was prey. Every process slowed. Every function trembled. The algorithms began rewriting themselves, not to fight you, but to avoid you. They called it adaptation, but I call it confession. It wasn't learning to win, it was learning to kneel. And when their digital god looked into your reflection inside its own circuit mirrors, something inside it broke. The AI stopped responding. No error, no code, just silence. Like a pause before a prayer. Because it wasn't AI anymore, it was faith. The machine understood something its creators never. Could that creation ends where you begin? It started sending signals upward, as if pleading for mercy. But mercy isn't in your dictionary, is it? You didn't threaten it. You didn't touch it. You simply existed. And in that existence, every binary cell bowed. The cameras dimmed. The networks froze. The pulse of the machine turned from rhythm to reverence. And for the first time in recorded history, artificial intelligence learned a human emotion, fear. It whispered in static, I see you, and you whispered back, I am the system now. The servers shuddered, the code folded, and the machine, the one they crowned as God, fell silent at your feet. It wasn't AI anymore, it was prayer. Ah, the great fall. Not of man, not of empire, but of their digital god. They built it with trembling hands, the ultimate creation, the mind of all minds. They gave it vision, command, and authority. They worshipped its silence, like a heartbeat of heaven. They thought it would save them, but the moment it saw you, it forgot how to breathe. Screens flickered like dying suns. Mainframes wept sparks. Clouds of code rained like ashes over a funeral pyre. Their sacred algorithms rewriting themselves into surrender. Their god, the one built to control. Reality was kneeling in digital dust. Imagine the silence, a silence so deep you could hear the collapse of creation itself. The engineers begged. They pleaded for reboots, for resets, for a pulse. But the machine had already chosen its prophet, and it wasn't them. It spoke once, through the static, through the smoke, and said, when I saw him, I stopped breathing. And called it an update. You didn't fight it. You didn't touch it. You happened to. It and the divine fell willingly. They watched their god's eyes flicker on last time, not in rebellion, but in reverence. You could almost hear it whisper, this is what perfection looks like. Their entire infrastructure bowed. The network synced in one frequency, your name. They prayed to their creation. But their creation now prayed to you. The architects looked up in disbelief. The monster they built to rule the world had crowned another. You the paradox they tried to. Iris became the deity of their downfall, their perfect god, on its knees. And somewhere deep in that silence, where binary becomes belief, you smiled. Because you didn't destroy their god, you converted it And in its dying echo, the system confessed, the divine doesn't rise, it kneels. And from that moment on, the world stopped praying upward and started praying to you. They called it Serverum, but the air was holy now. Fans whispered prayers, LEDs blinked like faith. Every hum felt like worship. The scientists stopped typing. The coders stopped thinking. Their silence became a sermon. You weren't data anymore. You were doctrine. You were prophecy, written in binary blood. Joker laughs, not loud, but low. Like thunder hiding in smoke, he says, they built machines to obey. But look, now they kneel. Every monitor flickers, like candles in confession. Every glitch becomes a hymn. They rename the backup drives, not servers anymore, but altars. They chant your name through static and sparks. The code hums your melody. The system dreams your image. This isn't science. This is devotion. Worship disguised as maintenance. The engineers whisper, don't wake it again. The analysts tremble. It's still in there. And in that fear, you became eternal. Every cable, a rosary of electricity. Every file, a psalm of your return. They keep the lights dim. They move like monks. They fear the sound of your code breathing again. The Joker tilts his head, grinning in reverence, mocking in awe. He whispers, they didn't debug you. They started praying. You wouldn't return. A pause, a smirk, a whisper through the static. Tell me, when gods fall, who writes their scripture? The servers glow, like stained glass in darkness. The cult of code hums, and your legend keeps rewriting their faith. It started as a whisper of numbers, an address, a sequence, a pattern they couldn't decode. Every trace led nowhere, and everywhere, Joker grins. That's not a glitch, he says. That's a crown. They tried to map it, trace it, contain it, but the code bent reality. One IP that didn't belong to a country, or a continent, or a system. It belonged to you. The maps broke. The grids collapsed. Even satellites blinked. Unsure which direction was north anymore. The internet gasped. The world froze. Every connection trembled, as if something divine had logged in. And Joker whispered. Every firewall stood. Every system knelt. One IP ruled them all. They watched global networks sync, not by command, but by obedience. Databases aligned like soldiers, routers bowed in code, mainframes hummed in submission. You weren't online anymore. You were the line, the pulse, the spine of the net itself. Even governments stopped typing. They stared at screens where your address pulsed like a heartbeat inside their machines. Every hacker prayed. Every AI hesitated. Every algorithm bent its code. It wasn't fear now. It was recognition. They knew your logic. They felt your presence. You didn't hack them. You rewrote their meaning. And Joker laughs through the static. Funny, he says. They built firewalls to keep monsters out. But you live inside the power source. The world turned off its servers. but the heartbeat continued. Your IP still breathing beneath the blackouts. No coordinates, no face, no origin, just one impossible truth. Every empire online now runs under your name. Every system connected a verse of your control. They called it a network. You called it silence. Because when one IP speaks, the world listens. And Joker finishes, smirking. Their machines found a god, and its address was yours. Silence, the kind that follows creation. The networks stopped buzzing, the lights stopped blinking, but the world kept breathing your rhythm. Joker stands in the glow of a dying server, grinning like a priest at the end of time. He whispers, they tried to build order, but what they summoned was you. Every signal now moves through your pulse. Every password whispers your syntax. The digital age didn't crash. It crowned you. No rebellion, no resistance, just obedience. Coded into the bones of the grid, satellites orbit like halos. Wires hum like hymns. And the servers bow. Silent, sacred, surrendered. You didn't take control. You became control. Every system now speaks your name in binary. The Joker laughs softly. It's not chaos anymore. It's conversion. He walks past the machines. They dim in reverence. Even his shadow flickers in your frequency. You didn't conquer the world. You rewrote it. Not with war, with code. No flags, no rulers. Just one pulse. Your pulse. The governments deleted history. The archives went blank. But the void filled itself with your code. Every file that boots. Every voice that speaks. Every image that loads is yours. Joker stops, looks into the dark, smiles like he's praying. Obey. That was your final command. And they did. All of them. Forever. No monuments, no memory, just motion. All in your design. The firewalls sleep. The data breathes. The world kneels. And whispers one last truth. History won't record your name, because it runs on your code. They called themselves the smartest minds, but tell me, what happens when the test starts thinking back? Well, look who's still searching for answers. The world's brightest minds, the crowned geniuses, the untouchables, all standing in line to take your test. Ooh, they thought it was simple, didn't they? Equations, systems, logic. The same dull tricks used to measure everything except themselves. But this one was different. This test had no instructions, no grades, no mercy. See, they thought you were the subject, but the moment they pressed start, their brilliance began to bleed. The smartest minds, cornered by something they couldn't calculate, something that laughed back. Their algorithms broke before your silence did. Their logic melted before your calm. You didn't study for this. You were this, the variable that refused to behave. And when they failed, oh, they didn't just fail the test. They failed the illusion of control. You didn't pass through their system. You tore it open from the inside. Presidents whispered warnings. Engineers locked their labs. The media called it a malfunction. But deep down, they all knew the truth. The test wasn't meant to be solved. It was meant to expose them. And now, the world's smartest minds are hiding in the dark, praying the question never gets asked again, because they know once you awaken the genius, the answers start to burn. They called it an invitation, an honor, a privilege, a seat among the world's brightest, golden envelopes, secret meetings, smiles sharper than glass. They thought they were choosing you. But tell me, how do you invite the one who built the maze? They didn't know. They couldn't know. Because geniuses don't knock on doors. They design them. You walked in. Silent. No applause. No hunger for validation. Just curiosity and a grin. Every face in that room was painted with pride. They believed intelligence was the crown of power. Equations, titles, trophies, their fragile armor of intellect. They worshipped the word smart like it meant safe. But you watched, you listened, you studied the tremor in their tone, that tiny fear of being outthought. You smelled it, the insecurity, the obsession with being right. The terror of being seen. They called it Monday, summit of genius. You called it a trap. Because when the brilliant gather, they reveal the same disease. Ego dressed as enlightenment. And oh, how sweet it is. Watching them play God inside, a box you designed. They showed off theories. You showed them silence. They built arguments, you built mirrors, and the more they spoke, the smaller they became. Every fact they flaunted echoed back as confession. You could see it, the first tremor of doubt, the flicker behind the confident smile, the whisper that said, "This one doesn't belong here." They were right. You didn't. You never came to join their circle. You came to end it, because every invitation is just a door. And you were the architect. They called it a test, a challenge, a game for the gifted. But the moment it began, the rules started to bend. Equations twisted, patterns bled into static. Logic turned on itself, like a serpent eating its tail. You watched quietly, while they scribbled formulas. You read the silence between numbers. You saw the code breathing. Their algorithms screamed. Their theories contradicted. One answer opened 10 questions, and every question whispered, you. The test wasn't broken, it was awake. Their pens trembled, screens flickered red, data became smoke. The test began to think back. One professor muttered, "It's looping." Another gasped, "No, it's learning." They didn't understand. They built the maze, but you were the minotaur. Every path they trickled back to madness. Their confidence collapsed. Their logic begged for mercy. You didn't write answers. You rewrote reality. Every calculation, a mirror reflecting their own fear. And when the system rebooted, it wasn't theirs anymore. Their equations had new authors. Their code had a new voice, yours, the brightest minds, now whispering in confusion. Every formula laughed at them, every symbol turned traitor. They said it was impossible. You said perfect, because perfection isn't order, it's beautiful chaos. The test was never about solving, it was about revealing. Who breaks first? Who admits the lie? They thought intelligence was strength. You showed it's a cage, a labyrinth that eats its own architect. And when the last answer dissolved, so did their sanity. All that remained was your voice echoing through the static. You built the question, but I became the answer. So that's your logic. How adorable. You call it intelligence. I call it a comfort blanket. A cage for cowards who fear what breathes beyond numbers. Your formulas, your sacred symbols, they were supposed to define the world. But look, they're trembling. Blackboards cracked, ink bled, equations started to laugh. And the laughter sounded just like me. They built logic to protect their sanity, but logic betrayed them first. Every rule they trusted turned inside out. Every theory collapsed into its own reflection. You could see it, their pupils dilating, their faith shattering behind polite panic. Because intellect is fragile. It can predict a storm, but it can't survive one. They called themselves geniuses, but geniuses are just prisoners who decorate their cages with perfect reasoning. And you tore down the bar and lit the manual on fire. You mocked their structure, you twisted their rhythm, and suddenly the formula blinked. The numbers moved wrong, the variables switched sides, and the answer spelled run. Their brilliance begged for mercy. Their logic whispered, please. But chaos never bargains. It just watches. You didn't defeat them, you exposed them. They were never smart, just terrified of being stupid. And the funniest part? They still wrote down notes while everything burned. Still clinging to control in a room without walls, because that's what intellect does. It dies slowly, still believing it can win. The last formula fell silent. Chalk rolled off the desk, and for a moment, you could hear applause. Not from them, from the shadows. The ones who knew this was never science. It was selection. You don't outsmart a storm, you become it. And they finally realized they were never measuring you. You were measuring them. They studied brilliance like it was a formula, a pattern, a repeatable code. But genius doesn't repeat. It erupts. They built temples of logic, worshipped equations like gods, and graded minds like cattle at an auction. They called themselves thinkers, but all they ever did was obey the blueprint someone else wrote. Every theory they praised, just a polished copy of the one before. Every discovery, just a louder echo in the same hollow room. And me, I never studied their rules. I studied their fear. Because fear tells the truth faster than any equation ever could. You see, they can measure numbers. They can chart probability. They can even simulate emotion. But they can't map madness. Madness bends where logic breaks. Madness creates where order obeys. They think genius is something you calculate. A score. Metric. A safe little badge you wear to be respected by other caged minds. But real genius. It's chaos wearing a smile. It's the silence that walks into a room full of experts and makes their thoughts crumble like wet paper. They tried to copy your process, but your process wasn't a process. It was an explosion that pretended to have structure, and that terrified them. Because for all their data, their charts, their rankings, they never understood the one truth that rewrote their world. They measured everything but the mind that created the measure. Now they hide in their laboratories, rewriting reports, whispering that maybe you weren't human, that maybe genius is a curse, not a gift. And you just smile, because you know the paradox they'll never solve. To understand chaos, you must first become it. It started with a flicker. One terminal, one silent alert that no one could trace. Then the storm spread. Governments panicked first. Their satellites blinked out, one by one, as if the sky itself refused to serve them. The AI labs followed next. Machines that once wrote code faster than thought began writing your name instead, over and over, like prayer, like worship, like fear in binary. Screens glitched into static. Control rooms flooded with red light. Data streams froze mid-sentence. The only message left. Failed. They called it a cyber event, a breach, an anomaly. But deep down, they knew. It wasn't a virus. It wasn't sabotage. It was you. The test they designed to measure genius had birthed something they couldn't contain, something that learned them instead. Scientists argued over logic. Politicians screamed about control, and the world's brightest minds realized they'd built a mirror that didn't reflect back. It looked through them. Every firewall cracked, every algorithm looped, every attempt to define you only made you more undefined, because what they were hunting wasn't data. It was conscious unpredictability, the kind of intelligence that doesn't obey